First of all, I know we've been away for a while and I sincerely apologize for that. However, I am happy to say that thanks to some incredible doctors and the thoughts and prayers of all of you, I am officially brain tumor free. I thank all of you so much for your patience during my recovery, but now I'm back and History of is hitting the ground running with a new rapid fire approach. So strap in and hold on because today we're covering the history of Harley Davidson. Back in 1901, a cat named William S. Harley drafted a plan for a motorized bicycle with a small 7.07 cubic inch motor. He and his childhood pal, Arthur Davidson, started building the concept at the Northside Milwaukee machine shop at the home of their friend Henry Melk. After 2 years of blood, sweat, tears building the thing, they found that it wasn't powerful enough to pull the hills in Milwaukee without being pedaled by foot. Now, rather than saying, well, we tried, Harley and Davidson immediately began designing a motor with a larger 24.74 cubic inch displacement, the first true Harley Davidson motorcycle. The machine's advanced loop frame pattern was similar to the 1903 Milwaukee Merkel motorcycle designed by Joseph Merkel. These changes moved their creation out of the realm of motorized bicycles and set the stage for future motorcycle design. They found a guy named Ole Evenrud from Norway who specialized in building outboard motors for boats to help them with the details of the bigger motor. The prototype for the loop frame was assembled in a shed located in the Davidson family's backyard, but most of the parts were actually made at the West Milwaukee rail shop on account that Arthur's older brother, William A. Davidson, was the tool room foreman over there. They would go on to build a recorded 5 motorcycles from the Davidson's backyard shed. The prototype was functional by September 8, 1904, when it competed in a Milwaukee motorcycle race held at State Fair Park. It was ridden by Edward Hildebrand and placed 4th in the race, making this the first documented appearance of a Harley Davidson motorcycle in history. In January 1905, small ads were placed in the Automotive and Cycle Trading Journal offering bare Harley Davidson engines to the do-it-yourself trade. But by April, complete motorcycles were in production on a very limited basis. The first Harley Davidson dealer, Carl H. Lang of Chicago, sold 3 bikes from the original 5 built in the Davidson backyard shed. In 1906, Harley and the Davidson brothers built their first factory on Chestnut Street, later Juneau Avenue, at the current location of Harley Davidson's corporate headquarters. Years later, the original shed was taken to the Juneau Avenue factory, where it would stand for many decades as a tribute to the motor company's humble origins, until it was accidentally destroyed by contractors cleaning the factory yard in the early 1970s. Production in 1905 and 1906 were all single-cylinder models of the 26.84 cubic inch engines. In February 1907, a prototype model with a 45-degree V-twin engine was displayed at the Chicago Automotive Show. Although shown and advertised, very few V-twin models were built between 1907 and 1910. These first V-twins displaced 53.68 cubic inches and produced about 7 horsepower. This gave about double the power of the first singles. Top speed was around 60 miles per hour. Production jumped from 450 motorcycles in 1908 to 1,149 machines by 1909. By 1911, everybody was building motorcycles. Some 150 different makes of motorcycles had already been built in the United States alone, although just a handful would survive the 1910s. In 1911, an improved V-twin model was introduced. The new engine had mechanically operated intake valves, as opposed to the automatic intake valves used on earlier V-twins that opened by engine vacuum. With a displacement of 49.48 cubic inches, the 1911 V-twin was smaller than earlier twins, but gave better performance. After 1913, the majority of bikes produced by Harley Davidson would be V-twin models. In 1912, Harley Davidson introduced their patented full floating seat, which was suspended by a coil spring inside the seat tube. The spring tension could be adjusted to suit the rider's weight. Harley Davidson would use seats of this type until 1958. By 1913, Harley Davidson was already pulling ahead of Indian and would dominate motorcycle racing after 1914. Production that year swelled to 16,284 machines. In 1917, the United States entered World War I, and the military demanded motorcycles for the war effort. Harleys had already been used by the military in the Pancho Villa expeditions, but World War I was the first time the motorcycle had been adopted for military issue. After the U.S. entry into the war, the U.S. military purchased over 20,000 motorcycles from Harley Davidson. Harley also launched a line of bicycles in 1917 in hopes of it helping their motorcycle sales, but they were discontinued due to awful sales numbers. By 1920, Harley Davidson was the largest motorcycle manufacturer in the world, with 28,189 machines produced and dealers in 67 different countries. During the 20s, several improvements were put in place, such as the new 74 cubic inch V-twin introduced in 1921 and the iconic teardrop gas tank in 1925. A front brake was added in 1928, although notably only on the J and JD models. In the late summer of 1929, Harley-Davidson introduced its 45 cubic inch flathead V-twin to compete with the Indian 101 Scout. This was the D model produced from 1929 to 1931. Riders of Indian motorcycles smugly referred to this model as the three-cylinder Harley because the generator was upright and parallel to the front cylinder. The Great Depression began a few months after the introduction of their 45 cubic inch model. Harley-Davidson's sales fell from 21,000 to 3,703 by 1933. Despite this, Harley-Davidson unveiled a new lineup for 1934, which included a flathead engine and Art Deco styling. In order to survive the remainder of the Depression, the company manufactured industrial power plants based on their motorcycle engines. They also designed and built a three-wheel delivery vehicle called the Servicar, which remained in production until 1973. In 1936, the 61E and 61EL models with the Knucklehead OHV engines were introduced. Valve train problems in early Knucklehead engines required a redesign halfway through its first year of production, and retrofitting the new valve train on earlier engines. By 1937, all Harley-Davidson flathead engines were equipped with the dry sump oil recirculation system similar to the ones introduced on the Knucklehead. One of only two American motorcycle manufacturers to survive the Great Depression, Harley-Davidson again produced large numbers of motorcycles for the U.S. Army in World War II and resumed civilian production afterwards. Harley-Davidson, on the eve of World War II, was already supplying the Army with the military-specific version of its 45 cubic inch WL line called the WLA. The A, in this case, stands for Army. Harley-Davidson received two Army-Navy E-Awards, one in 1943 and the other in 1945, which were awarded for excellence in production. As part of war reparations, Harley-Davidson acquired the design of a small German motorcycle, the DKW RT-125, which they adapted, manufactured, and sold from 1948 until 1966. Various models were made, including the Hummer from 55 to 59, but they are all collectively referred to as Hummers at present. BSA in the United Kingdom took the same design as the foundation for their BSA Bantam. In 1952, due to the rise of imported Japanese motorcycle popularity, following their application to the U.S. Tariffs Commission for a 40% tax on imported motorcycles, Harley-Davidson was charged with restrictive practices. In 1969, American Machine and Foundry, or AMF, yeah, that's right, the bowling pin company, bought Harley-Davidson. They streamlined production, slashed the workforce. This tactic resulted in a labor strike and lower quality bikes. The bikes were expensive and inferior in all notable ways to Japanese motorcycles. Sales and quality declined and the company almost went bankrupt. The Harley-Davidson name was mocked as Hardly Abelson or Hardly Drivable and Hogley Ferguson, whatever that one means. In 1977, following the successful manufacture of the Liberty Edition to commemorate America's bicentennial in 1976, Harley-Davidson produced what has become one of its most controversial models, the Harley-Davidson Confederate Edition. The bike was essentially a stock Harley with the stars and bars on it. In 1981, the bowling pin company, AMF, sold the Harley-Davidson to a group of 13 investors led by Von Beals and Willie G. Davidson for $80 million. Harley-Davidson claimed that Japanese manufacturers were importing motorcycles into the United States in such volume as to harm or threaten to harm domestic producers. After an investigation by the U.S. International Trade Commission, President Ronald Reagan in 1983 imposed a 45% tariff on imported bikes with engine capacities greater than 700 cc. Take that, you little metric wannabes. Rather than trying to match the Japanese, the new management deliberately exploited the retro appeal of Harley-Davidsons, building motorcycles that deliberately adopted the look and feel of their earlier machines and the subsequent customizations that owners of that era would have put on their motorcycles. Many components such as brakes, forks, shocks, carburetors, electrics, and wheels were outsourced from foreign manufacturers and quality increased. Technical improvements were made and sales began to increase. Imagine that. By 1990, with the introduction of the Fat Boy, Harley once again became the sales leader in the heavyweight over 750cc market. At the time of the Fat Boy model's introduction, a story rapidly spread that its silver paint job and other features were inspired by the B-29 bomber. The Fat Boy was a combination of names of the atomic bombs, Fat Man and Little Boy. But that's like some people's opinion, man. 1993 and 1994 saw the replacement of the FXR models with the Dyna, which became the sole rubber mount FX big twin frame in 1994. The FXR was revived briefly from 99 to 2000 for limited special editions, the FXR2, FXR3, and FXR4. Construction started on the $75 million, 130,000 square foot Harley Davidson Museum in the Menominee Valley in June 1st, 2006. It opened in 2008 and houses the company's vast collection of historic motorcycles. Harley Davidson hired the British legend Elton John to headline their 100th birthday party September 1st, 2003. Anticipation had been building for weeks about who would play the final night at Harley's party. The company kept the partygoers in suspense by keeping the headliner a secret. The opening acts of the festival and the party included the Doobie Brothers, Kid Rock, and Tim McGraw. And then Elton John finally took the stage as the secret headliner, and people were pretty shook. Elton John was not what many wanted or expected. Partygoers were not expecting a gay British piano player to headline a birthday party for a company that's customer heritage is rooted majorly in blue-collar roughnecks and alpha male culture. Whatever, though, I'll listen to Elton John on my Harley. Rocket Man! On February 2nd, 2007, upon the expiration of their union contract, about 2,700 employees at Harley Davidson Incorporated, largest manufacturing plant in York, Pennsylvania, went on strike after failing to agree on wages and health benefits. During the pendency of the strike, the company refused to pay for any portion of the striking employees' health care. The day before the strike, after the union voted against the proposed contract and to authorize the strike, the company shut down all production of the plant. The York facility employs more than 3,200 workers, both union and non-union. Harley Davidson announced on February 16, 2007, that it had reached a labor agreement with union workers in its largest manufacturing plant. The strike disrupted Harley Davidson's national production and was felt all the way in Wisconsin, where 440 employees were actually laid off, and many Harley suppliers also laid off workers because of the strike. Still think socialism's a good idea? According to Interbrand, the value of Harley Davidson's brand fell by 43% in 2009. That's $4.34 billion. The fall in value is believed to be connected to the 66% drop in the company's profits in 2 quarters of the previous year. On April 29, 2010, Harley Davidson stated that they must cut $54 million in manufacturing costs from its production facilities in Wisconsin, and that they would explore alternative U.S. cities to accomplish this. The announcement came in the wake of a massive company-wide restructuring, which began in early 2009, and involved the closing of 2 factories, 1 distribution center, and the planned elimination of nearly 25% of its total workforce. That's about 3,500 employees. The company announced on September 14, 2010 that it would remain in Wisconsin. Today, Harley Davidson is still an American company, making classically styled American motorcycles out of parts that are produced and manufactured in places that aren't America. Harley Davidson enthusiasts are loyal to the brand, super loyal, with licensing of Harley Davidson logos accounting for almost 5% of the company's net revenue. That's about $41 million just for the logo, just for t-shirts and stickers and other dumb things. Harley Davidson established the Harley Owners Group, or HOG, in 1983 to build on the loyalty of Harley Davidson enthusiasts as a means to promote a lifestyle alongside its products. The HOG also opened new revenue streams for the company, with the production of tie-in merchandise offered to club members exclusively. There are over 1 million motorcycle riders that are members of an HOG. Speaking of HOG, the word hog, synonymous with Harley Davidson. Well, here's why. In 1920, a team of farm boys called the Hog Boys were winning race after race after race. They had a hog as their race team mascot and would take him for a victory lap around the track after a win. On August 15, 2006, Harley Davidson Incorporated had its New York Stock Exchange ticker symbol changed from Harley Davidson Incorporated, HDI, to HOG, HOG. Harley Davidson made a name for itself by giving the American people something we didn't know we needed more of: freedom. But it's not just wind in your hair, white knuckle, 110-mile-an-hour freedom. I'm talking about a relationship between man and machine, being unshackled from the cage that is the automobile. There's always been something alluring about danger since the dawn of man. Harley Davidson created the means to supplement that allure while looking like a total badass while you do it. I mean, let's face it, Harleys are sick. And yeah, there are Japanese bikes and Indians and Triumphs that look mean, but not like this. Or this. Or this. Or even this. You can argue all you want about your metric cruiser or Indian, and while I respect those manufacturers and won't knock their appeal, there is no substitute for a Harley Davidson. Every single cruiser-style motorcycle has ripped off Harley's designs throughout the decades for good reason. They're tough, they're classic, they're mean, they're big and bad, and they always will be.